listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast by Dr. T. Michael W. Halcomb, Dr. Fredrick J. Long, Dr. Mario Melendez, Dr. Jennifer Noonan, and J. M. Smith. Welcome and enjoy.
Hello and welcome to Proof Text. I'm Michael Halcomb. I'm here with Dr. Fredrick J. Long, and we are doing a GrammarPoint episode. This is the third episode about nouns, and we've talked about case, number, and so it's only fitting that here we talk about grammatical gender. So Fred's going to get us going on the idea of grammatical gender, which I think also can be very, very confusing out of case and gender, maybe, or case and number. Gender may be one of the most confusing to I think to new students. So
just because
let's
English, right? Because English doesn't have gendered nouns.
not much, yeah. We have names that do seem to imply, gender, but nowadays people are trying to blur those lines. That's been going on for a while. I mean, a lot of names that have been typically masculine names are now becoming feminine names and vice versa. I mean, like the name Tony, and then be a female or a male, or
Terry,
whatever.
Sean. I know those are can be spelled differently, but
Timmy. So there's some there, and I think another place we often hear of it is like on boats. That's one. The names of boats will often hear people. Well, I guess we're talking about pronouns. Her, she, like boats are often feminine. So I guess I'm lapsing into pronouns, but let's
I think you're
with
pointing to the fact that there are some patterns to genders, and there are some patterns in Greek, not hard and fast rules, but some patterns to observe. So Greek noun is three attributes, right? Gender, number, and case. And then we've talked about number already, singular, plural. Gender, you have three basic options, right? So you have feminine, masculine, and neuter. Feminine noun take endings that are feminine, they're feminine looking, and the article that modifies them in adjective, you learn these as feminine. And they in Greek they're alpha and eta endings, but then you have some third declension endings that don't, they show some patterns, but they don't follow that pattern. But something can be a little bit random what's assigned a feminine gender, like places, geographic places can tend to be feminine. Abstract ideas can tend to be feminine, like dikeosune, aletheia. But then you can find other abstract ideas like a will, like someone's will. That's neuter, thelema. But yeah, some abstract nouns like aletheia means truth, dikeosune, justice. But you do have then masculine. So that's a gender. And again, there's not necessarily a pattern to that. You just kind of have to memorize which nouns are masculine. So when you're learning Greek nouns, typically you should learn the article that goes with them, what might be called a definite article. But since Greek has no indefinite article, we just call it the article. So it's not uncommon to, when you're learning a vocabulary word, if you're doing kind of a rote memorization, to learn the article, and that can help you with understanding the gender, particularly with third declension nouns. But we'll talk about declensions distinctly, so I don't want to get too much into declensions and endings.
I was reading something. I don't know how long it's been, but some time ago, about the fact that when an article is So the article, right, is typically not present in the first mention of a noun in Greek, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then subsequently after that, like the article will be used, like keeping it sort of online, I guess. Um, and what I was reading was saying that this is kind of a tangent. That's all right. It's related. Was that the reason for that is because it takes more processing to uh, remember the article with the noun and use the article with the noun rather than to just get the noun out there the first time and then you pick back up on the noun once
Hmm.
you've already like stated it and you've had time to like a moment to process it. Next time you mention that same referent, then you include the noun with it, which I found a pretty
You mean the
interesting.
you mean the article with it?
The article with it, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
which I found a pretty interesting argument or point. And I
But
think,
yeah.
go ahead, go ahead. What
Well,
was you gonna
I'd
say?
say an argument against that would be that in English that doesn't have articles, that the indefinite is used at first mention, then the definite at the second mention.
Mm,
You could talk about a house. I went to look at a house. The house was beautiful, and in the house was a refrigerator. The
hmm.
refrigerator had two doors. So a lot of times we
Yeah, I
introduce in
get
English.
that, but I think especially with like personal names, right? Like in English, we don't put the before personal names at all.
But in
Um,
Greek, you do.
but in
You
Greek, you
can.
do. So
You can.
when you
Yeah.
have Pavlos mentioned first in, the first time in Galatians, the very first word, Pavlos Apostolos, you don't have the article, right? But later in the next one, you get O Pavlos, perhaps, right? And then O
Mm-hmm.
Pavlos, O Pavlos.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think largely what I was reading was talking about like personal names, but not, I guess not just personal names. But I found that interesting because from like a language learning standpoint, I think it's a real struggle when students are trying to learn a vocab list and they got to get the word, but also realize then, oh, I got to remember to the article. And
Yeah, the
it's like
gender.
a whole other thing to try to attach onto that. So I wonder
Yeah.
if we do our students a disservice, especially early on, by forcing them to remember the article and sometimes even the genitive ending with the noun. Because this is way too much to process right out of the gate. So I think it should be
Yeah.
incremental, right? You just learn the noun, then you learn maybe the genitive, and then maybe the article. Like goes sequentially like that. But yeah,
Yeah, I think the reason, I mean, one benefit of learning the gender pretty quickly is so that you can understand modification, what's modifying that. Like adjectives will agree with that noun, and certain pronouns will agree with that noun's gender.
yeah.
So if you have the start of a relative pronoun clause, that relative pronoun, so the postman who picked up the mail, the postman, if that's male, the who is going to be masculine in form. So there it can help students disambiguate and understand what's modifying what. um
No, I
I
get
think a
that.
lot of, yeah.
Yeah. Just a question of like when to introduce it
Yeah,
in the pedagogical process. Like,
yeah, yeah,
um, and if the language is structured in such a way so as to make mental computing easier by not having the article there the first time, maybe we should take a cue from that in our language teaching. That's just
yeah,
a thought.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
My
So
pushback again would be, though, that the article occurs like 18% of the time.
I'm not saying never teach it. I'm just
Okay,
saying I'm saying right
with
out
the
of the
noun,
gate,
with the
just
noun.
the noun itself, and then go through a sequential process of bringing the article in, and
Mm-hmm.
then the next step bringing other case endings in, like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
sort of thing, like teaching it just sequentially.
In a
But
real inductive approach. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I could see that. So masculine, feminine, and then neuter.
yeah.
Yeah. So neuter
So go ahead.
tends to be non-gendered items a lot of times. So that's kind of interesting. Um, some nouns, you don't know what gender it is until you have the article with it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you need an article to determine whether it's masculine or feminine. I'm thinking of Pais. Is Pais that way? Pes,
Pest, yeah,
child,
pest,
pes,
pests.
pedos. Yeah. So there's some, third declension nouns that can go either way. And then the article will help to determine the gender, and then the referent. There are some patterns with neuter nouns, ma nouns, nouns that end with ma, ma, are things, for sure, things, and resultative kinds of things a lot of times.
Hmm.
So there's some clues, and like sune ending nouns is feminine, and that sune kind of helps you. Cis nouns that ends with cis, like klesis, like calling, that's feminine. Eus, like o basileus, is masculine, I think.
Your pronunciation is reverting, Fred. You're going back to Erasmian pretty
Really?
hard when using
Basilev, Basilev, Basa,
Vasilevs. Yeah.
Basilevs. Ah, that's a hard one for me. Basilevs. For those of you
Well, a
at
really
Erasmus,
hard one. We had somebody, a podcast listener, email
wow.
recently and ask, I heard you in one of your, I don't know if it was an episode or one of the uh, courses or whatever, but the person was asking about how to pronounce the name Zeus, right? And they're like, so based on your pronunciation, would it be Zevs? And I said,
Zevs.
absolutely, it would be
Zevs.
Zevs instead of that whole Erasmian Zeus or Zeus. But
Zevs.
Zevs, that's another one that trips people up. And Evangelion, they say people are stuck on Evangelion, right?
Yeah, yeah. Ooh, yeah, you. For sure.
So yeah, I
Well,
was
I think,
gonna say two before we end.
yeah.
Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah.
You got something
No, you
else?
get the last word. You get the last word.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, um, in our world today, that's just kind of going crazy with the pronouns and things like that. I mean, people are now starting to identify as nouns. It's craziness happening, but
Mm-hmm.
um, this whole idea of gender is a grammatical construct to begin with, and it always has been.
Mm.
And so we really need to separate sex from gender. And it's a really important thing because our society has tried to blend the two together
Yeah.
and equate the two when they are two very, very different things. Gender is a grammatical construct, right, that's been co opted to become a social construct, a social identity construct, and sex is
A biological
biological.
category,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And so this also gets into where mentally, like cognitively, some students struggle because it's so blurred, the lines are so blurred that they can't disambiguate between gender and sex. And so it would be really odd to have um, a grammatically uh, maybe masculine word that isn't a sexually masculine entity, right? So you can have or a grammatically feminine word that is neuter or a masculine entity, right? So
Yeah.
we need to be careful about how we teach, and I feel like it's a good disclaimer to like really just try to separate gender from sex altogether when we're thinking about grammatical gender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Helpful.
Um,
Thanks, Michael.
yeah. Well, I'll end there. And I'll say I hope that helps.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.